Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We've just been like gathering all of the resources. We're all flying by the seat of our pants here. My name's Io. I am a resident of Altadena, formerly resident of Altadena, still getting used to that. I lost my home. I lost the rental property that I had. And I'm organizing this because I've started posting videos with just practical information I was coming across as I was going through this process, and people needed what I was posting, and it's been getting reposted a lot. So I'm trying to gather any resources I can find that are both helpful to me and everyone that I know who lost their homes, which are hopefully going to be helpful to you and everyone else who lost their homes. So if you're here, it's probably because you or someone you know lost their home, and I just want to say I feel you, and this is an incredibly difficult thing, and we are going to get through this together, and we are going to gather the best and the brightest, and they're going to share what they have with us, and what we are not going to do, and what we're not going to allow is for people to swoop in and take advantage of especially vulnerable elder people, hard of hearing people, people who don't speak English as a first language, because especially the insurance and tax stuff is so dense and so complicated. We don't want anybody falling through the cracks. So this is going to be the first of several completely free Q&As that we're going to organize with people who are experts in this stuff to help people, and we're going to post them all online. If you can or you want to, at the bottom of your screen is an option for closed captioning. It's a little square that says CC on it. You can click on that, and then you can also change your language. So if you need it to be in another language, this whole conversation can be live translated for you at the bottom of your screen. I'm assuming some of you may be participating with elders or people who are not English speakers, so that might help you. Um, I am going to moderate this conversation, but you can put questions in the chat at the bottom, and our incredible team of volunteers will synthesize that and get it to my fatigued eyeballs to make sure that I see it. What we've done so far is we've gathered questions from my Instagram, and those have just been upvoted by the community. So what we're going to start with is those questions. With us today are Chris and Cameron Mooney, who are insurance experts. They used to be insurance adjusters. They thought the business was shady, so they left. They started their own firms. They also run a pro bono company that gives out free guidance on this exact process. So they're going to be here to answer our questions. You guys want to just quickly introduce yourselves, but like this version?
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, my name's Chris, and yeah, we were adjusters for the insurance companies for around 7 years, and we're trying to help people as much as we could from the inside, and realize that the rules that were given to us did not allow us to help people very much. So just like Io said, that we left that industry and started uh, advocating for people that needed it the most, and we will, yeah, that's pretty much our story. It's pretty short and simple. And in that, we've also just experienced so much through the Maui wildfires and through the Camarillo wildfires we just had, helping walk alongside people that entire process. So we know pretty intimately how things are being handled and the pitfalls that people are falling into, and just want to be able to share that information. I really appreciate what you're doing. I caught wind of your channel just the other day and was really stoked to figure out that we could do this together.
Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to also speak from my own experience. I've already gotten a call from my insurance company. And because I've been doing all of this culling and researching, I was paying attention to every little bit of language that they were using. And I caught something where I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. So I'm just going to give this as an example of the kind of thing that I want people to be aware of. My adjuster said to me, I'm going to send you a large amount of money. And I was like, because I'm panicked right now about how to pay for anything. She said, I'm going to send you this large amount of money. I'm going to deposit it in your bank account, and it's going to come from, and then she said, one of the four or five different buckets of coverage that I have, which is personal property loss. She said, I'm going to send you X amount over $100,000 from that. And it's
Yeah.
documentation free. And I was like, really? And I said, I don't need to provide you receipts for everything that I spend in every room in my house and all of this stuff that I was told. And she said, no, but if you want to access more of that money, which my coverage is larger than that amount, then you're going to have to provide receipts for everything that you spent that money on to prove that you spent that money. And that will then unlock the rest of your money. And I was like, got it. So one of the things that people are being told is they should hire a public adjuster, they shouldn't hire a public adjuster, and it's super divisive and confusing for people. So can you guys please just break down what a public adjuster is and in simplest terms, when someone should hire a public adjuster or when it's unnecessary?
Yeah, there's a big difference between the communities in Altadena and the communities that are in the Palisades, and that needs to be taken into account for sure. And before we get into should we hire a public adjuster, I want to define what the different roles are of adjusters and what a public adjuster is, because that's a big point of confusion because there's these words like expert and advocate and all these things being thrown around. And the only people that can be hired and licensed to work on your claim are either insurance adjusters that are working for the insurance company. And that could be either an inside or a desk adjuster that is just on the phone that will handle your ALE. It's the person that called you about your contents.
Wait,
And
what's
then
an
there's,
ALE? And as we go, let's not use any acronyms because people will not know what.
Okay. Yeah, smart.
yeah, ALE, additional living expenses. That is for your housing. And then there's the contents coverage. And those things are often handled by an inside adjuster or a team of inside adjusters.
Let me,
ALE, additional living expenses.
yeah,
Let's
I'll
give
try and
people a second to
simplify.
take notes.
Yeah. I'll simplify
ALE and
this
cost
section
of
of what we're
living.
saying. Yeah. I'll simplify this section of what Chris is saying because there'll almost certainly be opportunities for us to talk through those different buckets of coverage. But the important part to understand about the adjusters, and Chris will keep going here, is that when it comes to your insurance company's adjusters, there are various types and some of them can represent just one of those buckets of coverage for you. One of those is additional living expenses. One of those is your house, the dwelling. One of those is content. And we'll go into those, I'm sure, more in further questions. But the point you're making is one of the types of adjusters is this in the subset of we work for your insurance company under that umbrella, right? And then he can go over the public adjusters as well.
It's just confusing because we're all like the people that are in those roles are all called adjuster, and it gets really confusing. So a public adjuster is somebody that is hired by the public, that is hired by the insured, and they represent the insured's best interest as much as possible.
The insured is the policyholder. That's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Thank you. You have to correct me on using the industry jargon so much because it's just my brain.
I'll grab you. So just to break it down in like real layman's terms, the first phone call that we as people who've lost our homes are gonna get is from somebody from the insurance company saying, "Hi, I'm so sorry, my condolences, yada da, joke, joke, try to make you feel at ease. I'm gonna send you some emergency funds." Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to me was that person called and said, "I'm going to send you emergency funds." And they said, "I'm going to send you $5,000." And I said, "That's nowhere near enough for what we need to survive for the next who knows until you call me back." And he said, "Okay, I can make that $9,000." And it immediately doubled. So is there advice there about that first phone call and those first funds that people can take back to get more than to cover what they need?
Yeah, the first bit of advice is anytime your adjuster is telling you something, you want to get as much clarification as you can. And part of the reason is the information they might be giving you could be inaccurate, could be they're trying to get through things really quickly, and so they'll use jargon like we do when we're talking about things, and they'll conflate things together that shouldn't be. So when you were talking about your situation a little bit ago, where you're like, he called me and he said, "I'm going to give you this $100,000 and it's from this bucket of coverage, and then you're going to have to give me receipts." Depending on which bucket of coverage he was talking about that coming from is actually really important. And so you want to get every bit of clarification that you can get and say, okay, wait, where is this money coming from? Where in my policy? Be specific about it. And they're going to say, oh, it's under your contents coverage or your additional living expenses. That's the other coverage we just mentioned. And this is what you're going to have to do to get it back. And the reason it's important, even in that conversation you had, is what he told you could be inaccurate if he was saying that applied to your contents coverage. Most advances right now are being paid out of contents coverage. And if you're getting an advance out of that, you are actually not required to provide receipts to get additional money out of your contents limit. You might be required to get additional money out of your additional living expenses coverage, but not the other one. And we've already seen Camarillo wildfires and other ones where their adjusters are really quickly just trying to get through phone calls and honestly just get people off the phone quickly. It's like, yeah, just send us receipts. It'll be fine. You'll get your next bit of coverage. And so that's why my first bit of information, my tip that I would give you, anyone else on that phone call, get as much clarification as you can. take down notes. This is everything that he said. This is the answers to my questions, what I asked, and who I spoke to. And don't commit yourself to anything that they're saying there, because honestly, everyone that's experienced is still in a state of shock and still experiencing the trauma that went on from this event and is going to be for some time. It's not a time to try and be remembering, what are my monthly expenses month by month? If they're asking you questions about that, the answer is, I'm not sure right now. I need to go back and look, and I'll come back to you. Right.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to jump in here and say that this process is so complex and mushy for our brains that we being all of the people who've jumped in to help me deal with the situation and all of the helpers, we've created something called the PostFire Assistant program, which
Mm-hmm.
is dozens of vetted executive assistants who have jumped in to donate their time to
Oh,
helping
that's awesome.
post-fire sort through all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
it's live on my website right now, iolovesyou.com. Anyone who's on this Zoom, go there right now, click on Post-Fire Assistant. These are people who will get on a Zoom or FaceTime or phone call with you. They are a live human being who will walk you through the creation of let's say it's, I'm IO Right. It's writepostfire@gmail. They will set up a color-coded Google Drive series of folders for you. Inside of that, there is a document inside of there that is a record of every call that you have, and it's already pre-populated so that you don't have to go out and create any of this stuff. There's also a spreadsheet in there that has every single room of your house, and it also has a price thing at the bottom or on the side so that it will automatically aggregate all of this stuff for you, because the last thing you guys want to be doing or I want to be doing or have the capacity to do is create all of this admin stuff. So go to iolovesyou.com right now and click on Post Fire Assistant. It's completely free. Everyone has had their identity verified. They are vetted people. They have signed an affidavit that they will never use any personal information. You also shouldn't give them any sensitive information. They are not experts. They cannot give you legal guidance or financial guidance, but they will set up all of this like completely insane admin nightmare for you. They are executive assistants. They're human speed. They will do it for you. And they will also file your state tax relief form to get your taxes reassessed. iolovesyou.com, post fire assistant. Do that so that you can also see what these gentlemen are talking about, and it will get you set up. Carry on.
Yeah. So I'll just close what I was saying there essentially. And again, because a lot of these themes you're going to find our answers are kind of overlap. A lot of our tips are going to kind of overlap. So I'll close this one off by just saying, in those first phone calls, in any phone call with your adjuster, the answer I don't recall or I'm not sure is a very valid answer, right? And waiting until you can have some confidence in because it's not just about how confident you are in the answer, is how confident are you in the consequences of this answer. So if they ask you if your house is smoke affected and you're having that conversation right off the bat, and they're like, how bad does it smell in your house right now? How bad, like how much soot and ash do you see on surfaces? The way that you answer those can be really consequential. And I can use an example across almost any question that they might be asking you. The pin I'll put in this is the questions that you're being asked during a phone call with your adjuster are not typically lending themselves to coverage for you. They're lending themselves to exclusions for you. That 70-page document that is your contract with your insurance company, that policy, is by and large mostly exclusions, right? It's like you're covered for these things, but not in these scenarios and not in these ways. That's most of those 70 pages is the things you are not covered for. And so when you are answering questions that you don't know the consequences of, your answers could tie into some exclusion there. And this isn't to fear monger to say your claim's going to get denied. Most of these claims, if not a vast majority of these claims, are going to get covered. But there are pieces in your policy that have to do with debris removal, that have to do with hazardous materials, that have to do with code upgrade, soot and ash for California Fair Plan claims. There's specific language for those in there. And how you answer questions during these phone calls can have big consequences. So it's very valid for you to write it down, come back, talk to someone from our team, from IO's team, from whoever it is, to gain confidence before you provide a concrete answer to something.
So let's just go back to the previous question about when one should hire a public adjuster,
Yeah,
or
Chris, you can finish that.
if you can just handle this yourself, because
Yeah,
people
I mean,
get these phone calls.
yeah, that's such a nuanced question as well. I'll try and get really direct to the point of it, is that the people that would want to hire one right now, it's people that need assistance to get through a claim, like people that don't want to deal with a claim, because you're paying out a part of your claim money to somebody to help you out. And so if you want somebody to be responsible for every aspect of your claim, to completely take over all negotiations, and all you do is sit back and get answers and talk to them, then that's when you would hire a public adjuster. Another place to hire a public adjuster is further on down the claim, after you use all the free resources that we could possibly give you and get all of the money you possibly can out first, and then you hit a wall, and then you call a public adjuster. The caveat to that is everything you do up to the point of hiring somebody is going to affect how well that person can advocate for you once they're hired. So being as educated as possible from the very first conversation is really helpful, so that it doesn't mess it up later down the line when you have $300,000 left and they come back and they're like, oh, but you said this and this 3 months ago, and I can't really do anything for you now.
I was going to say, I've also been able to summarize this point. I've had a lot of conversations just around this question, right? And for us, being connected to that advocacy industry, that public adjuster, we're licensed public adjusters, but the vast majority of work we do is helping people self-advocate for themselves. And so having a perspective into both of those lanes has been helpful. And what I've said to people is there's two questions that I'll ask about a claim to know if a public adjuster can fit, if there's room for a public adjuster in that claim. And one is the claim complex enough that it like a public adjuster can be useful here, right? Is there enough going on? Are there things happening? And the answer to that one is yes, for every claim from this wildfire. They're all complex enough that a public adjuster or an advocate can be helpful. But the next question is there financial room in that claim? So looking at your policy limits, are you vastly underinsured? Are you, and if you're like insured to value or near it, are you with the understanding that you may come out of pocket or come out of some of your contents coverage to pay for that service of a public adjuster in your claim? And none of this is to say that it's not worth it when it is worth it. But the point is, those are two really important questions. And a lot of public adjusters might be only focusing on the first one. Is this complex enough? And the answer, obviously, yes. These claims are all complex and big and tough to get through. But if there's not the financial room in there for one, then you need to consider what the effects of you on your claim are going to be. And I think that's an important thing to think about.
I want to add really quick right now, up until you have a public adjuster is not even allowed to reach out to anybody right now by law.
To solicit.
Solicit. You can reach out to a public adjuster and ask for help, but if anyone's calling you and pushing you right now, then I would just say step away from that person, because the thing is that there's good and bad apples in every side of the table, and there's a lot of bad public adjusters and a lot of bad attorneys, and there's a lot of good public adjusters and a lot of good attorneys. One of the first signs you're going to see right away is how hard they're pushing the sale on you, especially right now. They're not allowed to sell you anything until 7 days after the evacuation order is lifted. So just know that for yourself.
Okay, so just to translate this for example, people in Altadena, one thing that's really hard for people to understand who have never built a house is how underinsured they are, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'm being told is that the per square footage rebuild cost in Los Angeles County is a very subjective thing, because obviously material costs are about to shoot through the roof. Builder pricing is about to shoot through the roof because there's this extraordinary demand. Once the debris is removed, the demand for all of these things is going to shoot through the roof. So let's say ballpark, it's somewhere between $400 and $700 a square foot to rebuild your house. What I'm using is an easy way is to go look at the square footage of your house, because coverage, as I understand it, is only to rebuild the square footage that you had. So for those of us on this call who have houses, don't calculate, for the purposes of this exercise, the dream house you would like to build. Just use the amount of square footage that you previously had and take the amount $400 to $700 a square foot, and take $400 to $700, let's say make it $550 as an average, and times that by the square footage that you had. That number is roughly what you would need to rebuild your house. So if that number is $700,000 and your whole home replacement cost in your insurance policy is $400,000, then you are what Chris just said is underinsured. So you are not a person who has wiggle room to pay somebody 10% of your payout to negotiate your claim for you. You are now a person who's going to have to go get extra FEMA money to cover that gap. Is that correct, guys?
Yeah, that's totally correct. You did a great explanation there. The little bit of caveats I would put in there is when you look at that number, it's called coverage A. That's your dwelling coverage. It's the first one listed in anyone that owns their property. And say that, no, let's use an even number, 500,000 is what you have there. And you did that math that you just did, which I think is really good math. $400 to $700 is a really good range to think of as the rebuild cost. You're right. It is subjective. There's going to be so much competition. I don't think if you're seeing really inflated prices, talk to more contractors. There are going to be ones that are willing to do it for reasonable costs. We're going to figure out the material costs as a state to get the stuff here. They shouldn't shoot up astronomically. And if they are, there are probably other options. But so your math was really good there. The only caveat I'll put there is when it says $500,000 next to your dwelling coverage, in that extra 70 pages of your policy, there are little bits that offer additional coverage. So what I've been helping people do, and what we offer a free policy review with free policy insights, and we'll walk through and say, hey, it says 500 there, but you have extended replacement costs, which is going to add whatever percentage it says here, which is 10 to 50% more of that. Then you, and a lot of people have extended replacement costs. You have additional debris removal, which is typically another 5% on top of that. You can have additional, what's another one that I might be missing here? Oh, ordinance and code, which is another 10 to 25% on top of that. And so once you add those numbers together, sometimes those equals suddenly you're at 850,000. And so
before we go too far down this rabbit hole, can we just quickly break down what the main buckets of coverage are that people have?
Yeah. So there are 4 main ones, and I'm just going to focus on these 4 because if I go out on a tangent on any of them, there are a bunch of different little things that have to do with them. But and let me know if I'm missing anything here, Chris. But coverage A on pretty much any owner's policy is the dwelling coverage. That's your home. It's not the sheds or anything like that else. It's your home. It's the walls, the roof.
And that's the rebuild in this case where people are most if somebody has a total loss. When you say dwelling, you mean the cost to rebuild that house.
Yep.
That
Including
doesn't
the
mean
slab.
anything that's in it. That just means the house itself, the appliances, anything that's like attached to the wall.
Yeah, and maybe not the appliances. Those are a wiggle room that's really good to be strategic about.
If you could, anything that would fall out if you pick your house up and shook it upside down, those are considered your contents. If anything that's attached to the house is part of your dwelling.
Yep.
Great, super simple. If it's attached to the house, if you pick the house up, turn it upside down, it would fall out. It's not part of dwelling coverage.
Yeah. There's just the tiniest bit of nuance there, but we don't need to go into it. And then the coverage, so I'm going to go into a couple here. These next 2 can switch around between different insurance companies. So for instance, most insurance companies, your next one is called coverage B, and that's other structures. That is your sheds, your fences, your I think landscaping falls underneath that sublimit easily.
Some of landscaping is a separate.
Yeah, it's a separate. But it's the things that are and even your pool would fall under there, and the pool equipment would fall under that. If you have a deck that's not attached to the house, things like that, those would fall under that other structures coverage.
Walls and fences, playground units, stuff like that.
Yeah. And then coverage C in most policies is your personal property or contents. That's the language. If you hear your adjuster say personal property or the word contents, that's they're synonymous, those 2 terms.
So that's the stuff that would fall out if you turned it upside down.
Exactly. Yep. It's the stuff that would fall out if you turned it upside down. And even if it's the stuff outside of your house, your furniture outside of your house, your kids' toys outside your house, things like that. So anything that would that would all be your personal property or your contents. The caveat is State Farm and maybe some others switch the letters around. So coverage B for State Farm is contents and coverage C is other structures, which is dumb. But just to know that those 2 buckets can get switched around in different insurance carriers. Last one is coverage D, which is additional living expenses or loss of use coverage. Those are also synonymous with each other. And they,
That's where we're gonna go next. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of people that have a lot of questions about that specific one.
and
Yeah.
that's, we can dive into questions. The note I'll put in that for us to dive into, it's the most common area of underinsurance that we're seeing from this wildfire event is in additional living expenses.
So we're also going to address renters insurance. So anybody on here who has questions about renters insurance, we're going to get to that also. For now, one of the most important question that's coming up for a lot of people, including myself, is um, loss of use coverage. What do you do if the number that they're telling you, like for example, the number that I was given for loss of use is about it's like a fraction of what I would actually need to survive in Los Angeles at the same standard of living for 2 to 3 years. So what do you do if your loss of use number that you're being told is nowhere near what you need? What recourse do you have and what rights do we have?
Well, I also want to say too that there's possible some FEMA stuff that can play into this, and we're not FEMA experts right now, but we will between this and the next webinar be researching everything we can about FEMA for this specific situation.
It's a fluid situation
yeah,
there too with the state and what they're doing. So we're trying to gather all that and see how it plays into this.
Yeah, they give new laws and regulations for the specific event, and so with loss of use coverage, you have to take what that amount is. There's not usually any other extra coverages in there. And they do technically owe for you to have the same standard of living. But the question is, if you pay for that same standard of living, how fast will you exhaust the number that's there? And so you need to look at that number that's there and think that this is going to be at least 2 years to rebuild. I mean, in Paradise, it was 5 years, but we're hoping that down here that Los Angeles gets their stuff together and makes it happen faster. So you'd want to calculate the 2 years. You divide your amount of coverage by 2 years, and you see this is how much I can spend every month without going out of pocket. Or you have to see like I have to spend more than this. You can calculate how much you have to go out of pocket. There's not a lot of
To triple
recourse.
clarify, sorry to interrupt you, just to triple clarify for those who are on this call, because there's a lot of information. Look at your policy and go find your it's section D probably additional ALE additional living expenses, or it might be called loss of use coverage. Look at that amount and then divide that number by 24. The person I spoke to said divide that number by 36. So
Yeah.
divide the number by 24 or 36.
Mm-hmm.
That is the amount that you will have for monthly living expenses.
The problem with dividing by 36, just so you know, it depends on the insurance company. Some of them may be a little more generous than others, but most policies have a stipulation that they only pay, not most, but a good amount, that they only pay loss of use for 12 months. So whatever that number is, you can only divide it by 12 for this wildfire event. And for most wildfire events in California, the state requires that be able to be moved to 24 months. So that's already been issued by the Department of Insurance in California. So that's why we're saying 24 months. It's a little idealistic to say that the rebuild's going to be done by then. I think for some people it will. But if you try and divide it by 36, 24 months from now, your insurance company can just stop paying you, even if you have money left in that coverage. And it depends on the carrier as to how generous they might end up being. If they'll extend that out again, if the state will extend it to 36 months, we've seen them do things like that in the past, and the state will be under some immense pressure, I think, to do so. But the problem most people are going to have, and this is the important point, is that once you divide that number by 24, you're already at a really low number, right? You divide it by 30. I talked to someone the other day that had $40,000 in loss of use coverage, and they live in a 2 or 3 bedroom condo in Altadena is where they were. And so you divide that by 24 and you're not able to rent a room in Los Angeles, right? And you divide it by 36 and it's barely enough for food each month. So
what do we do?
So the point is, I think Chris and I talked about this question earlier, actually, and there's hopefully we'll be able to give some better news. And I think we will from the FEMA. This is where FEMA will come into play, hopefully, for a lot of people. But we're insurance experts, right? And specifically insurance claim experts is what we will talk about, is like, we understand what happens inside and outside of a claim and how that goes. And it is good to have clear eyes going into it. Your insurance company isn't going to look at that number for that person that had 40,000. You can beg all you want and say, can we please make it 100,000 that I have available here? It just doesn't happen. right? And that's not where the state steps in and says, you know what, you have to double the amount of insurance that someone gets under their ALE. They're just extending the time limit right now. And I think FEMA is going to be the one that closes the gap and helps people. But I would say it's not worth the battle trying to get your insurance company to increase that coverage. A lot of people think it is. And I don't think it's going to be worth the energy if that's the fight you're going to choose to have.
Okay, so just to like synthesize that clearly, don't waste your time fighting with your insurance company for additional loss of use funds because they're not going to bring up the rear. Take that money, use it, and then try to bring up the rear with FEMA.
Yeah, I would say that, and really look at, I mean, be really smart about this. Don't be idealistic about it. Don't go rent the place that might like, think about how you, what's the kind of the minimum that you need to be comfortable and survive right now. And that's what I would say is where you should make these early decisions is be really conservative with how you use these funds. And if 4 to 6 months from now, a couple different scenarios happen, FEMA steps in and is really helpful, or the rebuilds start happening in earnest and they're going to be done in 18 months and not 24 months. At that point, you can go back to your insurance company and be like, I'm going to move to a nicer place and utilize some more of these funds. This isn't good for my mental health. This isn't good for my family. We need something nicer and the funds are there. But don't be idealistic in these first few months.
Question for you. My insurance company said that they were able to pay out lump sums in advance. So as long as I was able to provide them with a lease for the next 12 months, they would
Yeah.
send me a check for that. What is your guys' advice? My assumption is that it's better to get out from under having to deal with the insurance company as much as you possibly can. So if you have something locked in or you can show that you're going to be somewhere for a certain amount of time, just take the lump sum and deal with it yourself. Do you guys have any advice against that? Or is there any documentation you have to provide?
There's good reason to do that is because if you have a short-term rental, especially for an insurance claim, and they know it's for an insurance claim, if it's 1 or 2 months, they'll add 80% to the rent. If it's 3 months, they'll add 70% to the rent. They do these premiums on top of the rent. If you have a 12-month lease, it's going to be the cheapest way to get rent. That's how, because the insurance carrier is going to give you a vendor to help you get a place. And so I see you looking a little confused. And this is what happens when that vendor goes and asks the Airbnb, hey, can someone come in here and rent this? And they say, yes, if it's only going to be for a month, it's 70% more if it's only for a month. It's and so
Airbnb rates essentially if it's only for a month. Like
no, they have an actual premium chart.
Oh yeah.
And so if you get a 12-month lease, you'll likely get a better deal on a place. And as long as if you're okay with that spot, then the 12-month is the best way to stretch out your money.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that I understand. I was just curious about with the insurance company, it's advisable to take that lump sum.
Anytime they offer you money, I wanted to touch this early as well too. Anytime they offer you money, take it. There's no reason to not take money for the like that I can think of from the insurance company. Nothing is a settlement, nothing is an agreement unless you sign a piece of paper saying that I will not come after you for any more money. That everything is just get it out from them as fast as they can because it's first come, first serve right now. And while they're in the mood to be paying out money, you let them pay you money.
Well, the most attention's on them too. Like the most scrutiny that's going to be on your insurance companies is in the next 2 to 3 months. Unfortunately, this like we work these disasters helping people all throughout the year. We were in Maui immediately after that wildfire helping people. People aren't talking about Maui anymore. Lahaina was devastated by it. So people aren't talking about what happened in North Carolina anymore. And they were devastated. That North Carolina was devastated by the storm that hit there. So this will feel very close to home for all of us that are near it and those that have experienced it for a long time, but it'll drop off of the national stage very quickly, like things do in the news. And then the insurance companies are not under as much scrutiny. So Chris's point is take those funds that you can get. There's a lot of fear that people have around, if I take it, am I accepting something? Is this something final? And the answer is no. Insurance companies used to try more tricks like that. They can't do it anymore. It's not like by signing a check, you're secretly signing some type of contract that says, I accept this settlement as, and even the language they use can be confusing. They can say undisputed amount. And that sounds like, I'm not going to dispute this amount. If I take this, right, that's what this means. And it actually means the opposite. And it means that there's no dispute as to whether or not this is at least as much money as we owe you right now. And the point is getting those funds from your insurance company as early as possible is going to be smart, and you having control of them. Because if your adjuster is willing to send you 50,000 or 100,000 right now and is feeling generous in that, and not asking for you to give all the proof of the Airbnbs and everything you're in, and you say, wait, I just want you to hold on to it. I don't want to have to manage it. I don't want to have to think about it in my account. The next adjuster assigned, and there will be many on your claim, may not be as generous, may not hold to that same commitment. You may be 2 months down the line and new adjusters on there, and you say, hey, the last person was going to send me 50 grand. And the new one says, well, you're going to have to send us receipts if you want that. And then you'll be wishing, dang, I just wish I would have taken that earlier, so I didn't have this other job hanging over my head to get those funds.
So quick question for you. For example, my case where they're like, we're going to send you this amount out of your personal property amount, and it's documentation free as long as you don't want more. And if you want more, the other 70% that you're entitled to, you have to provide receipts of all of the initial amount that you spent on personal property. That sounds like a trick to me, right?
Yes. If they paid that out to you out of your personal property, it's inaccurate. I can tell you what they said to you. You do not have to provide receipts for money they give you to get additional. So I'll paint a really quick picture. Your personal property limit is 200,000, right? They come out and they say, hey, we're going to give you 100,000 of that. You don't have to give us anything. But if you want that next 100,000, you got to go give us receipts that you use this first 100,000. That is not accurate. All you have to do to get all of that 200,000 is to prove to them that you had at your house when it burned down $200,000 worth of things.
That's
The
right.
money that what they're referring to is what they need receipts for is what's called depreciation, which is another conversation when we don't have to get into it here. And it's something separate that happens there, but you do not, and you do have to give receipts for that, but you do not have to get receipts to get to that limit. You have to give proof of what you had, not what you're going to have.
That's what I thought. Okay, so they're offering people, what I'm hearing is they're offering people they're saying it's just we'll help you out with a recorded call with a person who is going to go through videos of their house room by room. What I'm also hearing is that those adjusters use an algorithm system to price out the stuff that's in your house. And if you let them do that, then you, for example, say, I had a pair of Nikes, and what you mean is your $175 Air Jordans, and then they put it into an algorithm and they find the lowest priced Nike sneaker and they give you $23. So can you give guidance on what people should do themselves to protect themselves from things like that right now with what's being offered?
Yeah, that happens all the time. There's two different ways that the carriers are going to use an algorithm to do things. One of them is that they're going to ask you how many rooms are in your house, how big is each room, and what type of things were in each room. And they'll give just like a lump sum for each room. And sometimes that actually works out in the favor. Like sometimes it does. But if they do that and you don't reach your limits, then what you'd want to do is create a list of all the most expensive items in your house to try and push past that limit. So that's the one way where they kind of, but that's not the same thing as them like going over a phone call and going through videos of every room in your house. That's a separate thing. So if it's too nuanced to get into the details of how that works. But the second way is that you create a contents list. And I saw that this question was on the Instagram as well too, of like, are you required to create a detailed contents list? It's a yes, and during situations like this, you're not required to create a super detailed contents list. You can do a generalized contents list. So if you had a pair of shoes that was 150,000 or 150,000, that's a nice pair of shoes.
Trump sneakers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The first pair.
And so if you have a $150 pair of shoes, you write that on its own line because it's a unique thing. But if you have 10 pairs of shoes that are all $50, you can put 10 pairs of shoes, $50, 20 shirts, $20, like $20 times 20, you can lump some stuff together. And so when the carrier is offering all of this stuff, what they can do preemptively, the question was, what can people do to protect themselves? Is right now, the closer you are to the loss, the more you can remember. And so sit down with a cup of tea and like it sounds woo-woo, but get meditative with it. Like sit and really like imagine yourself in that room and start listing out everything that is in that room. And
go detailed. Like when you're thinking and visualizing it, and you're thinking of walking into your bedroom, start by walking into your bedroom and opening your nightstand, right? And thinking what was in here, because, and he'll keep going into it, but every little thing builds up. Every little detailed toothpick, mint, pair of underwear, all those things add up.
Yeah, you have
So
20 nice
before you
pens in your
continue,
house.
I just want to remind everyone on this Zoom and anyone newly who has joined, one of the things that volunteers have created for us on iolovesyou.com right now, you can click on PostFire Assistant. We have an squadron of pre-vetted executive assistants who have volunteered to give their time for post-fire fire survivors who've lost their homes. You can get on a call with this person. They will set it up for you so you don't have to do it. They have pre-filled spreadsheets for exactly this purpose it's already been set up. Post Fire Assistant on iolovesyou.com. It is free. They will get on a call with you and create a Google Drive, a Google account, Gmail account. If I had a brain, this would be a lot easier. A Gmail account for you. So let's say it's writepostfire@gmail.com, and they will then go through and give you color-coded Google Drive folders for everything you're gonna need to gather for this process. They have a pre-populated spreadsheet for every room in your house. They will also help you file your tax forms. It is completely free. iolovesyou.com, post-fire assistant. Please
I'll
carry on.
also say we're happy to take a look at those and compare them to what really successful lists have looked like in the past that we've seen users create. Because there are very strategic ways, not just of how to put those together, but again, how detailed or not detailed to be in certain sections of it. So we're happy to help take a look at those as well.
Yeah, we could talk to your back office people about how they're doing that as well too. Make sure everything is.
My back office at my big org that I run now, all of a sudden.
Oh yeah.
Okay, please carry on with what you were saying. Sorry to interrupt.
And that's pretty much the end of it. As far as contents too, you said that I really want people to understand this because a lot of people are confused about this. A lot of calls I get are about this. You are offered a lump sum of money from your contents coverage in California after a wildfire like this. They owe you, the calculation is weird, but they owe you 30% of your coverage A limit that's the calculation. 30% of your coverage A limit is the calculation of your contents coverage. So they have to give you that much worth of your contents coverage upfront, no questions asked. A lot of carriers are offering 10, 20, 30, even $100,000, but it's up to $250,000 that you
Can you
can get
just
from that.
break down what because that was so hard for me to wrap my mind
And
around.
some carriers aren't following this, so
They have to.
I know, but I'm saying that they're
I
paying
can,
30.
I can,
Yeah.
let me break it down the way that my brain was able to understand it. If, for those who are on the call who lost your home, if you look at your policy and you see all of your coverages, when you look at dwelling coverage, let's say it's $500,000. The money that they're going to offer you is not coming out of that bucket. It's not money that's being taken away from your rebuild cost. All they're doing is looking at you're going to get money from your personal property bucket. They're just going to use that dwelling amount as the metric to calculate how much to
Exactly.
send you. But it's actually money coming out of your personal property bucket. So let's say your coverage is $600,000 to rebuild your house. 30% of that is $180,000. And that is $180,000 of your personal property bucket that they're going to send you. So don't get confused that it's 180,000 of your rebuild money. It's not. They're just using whatever your dwelling coverage is as the metric to calculate how much of your personal property bucket to send you right now.
And I'll say this as well. And if it makes sense for us to share our free side at the end, then that's totally fine. But one of the things that we help people do is to make those types of requests to simplify it. So, hey, here's the templated letter to send asking for this amount, because what Chris just outlined, that's what they're supposed to do. The majority of insurance adjusters right now are not doing that. They're calling and offering some flat amount of 5,000, 10,000, or maybe 50,000 or more dollars, and just saying, hey, here's your amount to start. And whether it's ones that we have public adjusting clients for premium ones, even for them, nice big insurance companies, really experienced adjusters, we're having to tell them, hey, this person's rights are actually to have this 30% calculation. And on our self-advocacy one, that's one of the main requests that we're helping people make in these early days is, hey, go ahead and request this additional amount. Here's the templated letter. Here's who to send it and how to send it to.
Yeah.
So you will most likely have to ask for that amount if you are going to want to get it. If you're not advocating for it, you're going to get something lesser, almost certainly.
Yeah. And if you have representation, I would request you can ask your public adjuster not to take a fee on that, because that's something you should call yourself and with a phone call be able to get and save yourself $25,000 on a public adjuster fee.
100%.
You should not be paying for that.
Yeah, there's a pin or like just a little rewind to the public adjuster conversation. If someone does decide to hire them, everything in a claim is a negotiation, including the first conversation that you have with a public adjuster that you might want to hire. And so negotiating with them and having a very clear understanding of how their fees are going to apply. Are they going to apply to your additional living expenses? They shouldn't for any of these claims. They really shouldn't. How are they going to apply to undisputed payments that are given, especially on your personal property? So for instance, on any public adjusting client that we're working with on some of these, that's the first thing that we'll tell people, hey, you're going to go make this request for this 30% of coverage fee. And even if I have to help you a little bit with it, that shouldn't be this big fight, and nobody should be taking a fee on this first portion. Nobody needs to take a fee on it. And so it's just to say, if you did decide to work with one, you can talk with him about that. Hey, like, are there areas that I can be involved that you don't have to take a fee on? Right. And so anyways, be proactive, be an advocate for yourself, no matter what the situation is there.
A big question we're getting is from people who have homes left standing, but they don't know if they're safe because of smoke damage and stuff. Can you cover that?
Yeah, these are often the most complex, more complex to negotiate at the beginning, because you have like several months to hurry up and figure out what you need to do. And
everything feels a lot more subjective on these claims.
Yeah.
What is damage is the question.
Yeah. And so, in these situations, you're going to need to really start taking responsibility for how you want the claim to go from the very beginning. Start getting all the information you can, and including what I'm about to give you here, is that what is considered smoke damage. It's different if you have a California Fair Plan insurance policy. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but a lot of people can only get that. Ash and soot is not, it's called a named peril policy, meaning the only things that it has to explicitly say this is covered. And it says smoke is covered, but it doesn't say soot and ash is covered. And it's hard to prove that smoke was in the home. So in those situations, I would recommend getting an industrial hygienist to come in, and there's tactical ways. You have them look around the air vents or where air is getting underneath the door, anywhere that air can like move through. You have an industrial hygienist go to these very tactical areas where there's going to be the most buildup of smoke and take samples looking for carbon.
Let me offer just a little the context behind what Chris is saying, because he's going to keep giving some really good details here. And that is, if your home burned down, your adjuster isn't going to be asking, did your home burn down? Right? That is very clear. And then the negotiation is, what does this cost? What Chris is talking about here is establishing what is actually affected and what needs to happen for it. So if there is smoke somewhere, what does that mean? If there was smoke somewhere, what does that mean? And that piece of these claims is pretty complex and really challenging. And some insurance companies are generous is the wrong word, are workable within this, and other ones have really hard lines. And so what he's talking about here is ensuring, no matter what insurance company you have, that you're setting yourself up for success to advocate for your safety and for the coverage that you're owed ultimately. So, keep jumping into, I think the smoke damage is a really important one to talk through.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are going to get left behind when there is a whole bunch of attorneys and things that are helping people. There's not going to be leftover attention to give to people with smoke claims. And so these are the ones where you really have to step up and be your own advocate. And so establishing that there is smoke damage is the biggest piece. You can have your house next door burned down and it's obvious that there was smoke in this house.
Smoke damage is smoke in your house. That is damage. So it doesn't mean that it burnt something or anything. It's smoke in your house. That is smoke damage.
Okay. And this one I can go on and I will keep it short. One of the main things is you have to get all your contents cleaned. and you'd
Or
want
replaced.
or replaced. And so the things that you want replaced, not cleaned, are your mattresses, your pillows, anything that has like cushioning inside of it. And they'll want to clean that. The carrier will be like, oh no, we don't have to replace that.
Or we'll do just your mattresses. That's a common thing.
Yeah, we'll do just your mattresses. Anything that has cushion inside of it, you can't get the VOCs and the dioxins. These are chemicals that are very, very dangerous. Dioxins are up there with asbestos. And anytime plastic burns, it emits dioxin. And you also posted a video about this, EO, about the type of chemicals that are in there. That's a really good video to jump on your Instagram and watch. And so making sure that the vendor that you choose is going to advocate for you. A lot of these vendors work for the insurance company. If the insurance company is sending a vendor out there, they're likely going to do a subpar job. So you'd want to find your neighbors, people that have had good experiences with cleaning vendors, mitigation vendors, and find one who, and make an agreement with them up front. Are you going to recommend that my cushion, my beds, and my cushioning all is a total loss, not just clean, but total loss of these things? And you need someone to advocate for you for that along the way. An expert has to say that this is not cleanable a lot of the times. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put a note. One of the things that we should maybe go over, IO, or maybe we can do a separate video on, is that one of the conversations Chris and I like to have the most is, what are the incentives of every person that's at play in your claim? The adjusters, the contractors, the vendors, the public adjusters, if you have one. What is everyone's incentives here? These smoke claims, because we're working actively on them in Camarillo, we have learned, these are things we've known, but the incentive misalignment between everyone at play becomes really apparent in these smoke claims. And the more you go into detail, it becomes, we understand why, and we can do probably some separate conversations about it. But that you can hear in what Chris is talking about, because there's all these different things you can go into. They're essentially complex, and it's difficult to get all those things that you should be advocating for.
And nobody has your best interest in mind besides you. The next level up is the person that you hire to represent you. And then everybody else is trying to just figure out how to make the most money off of your claim. And so, the vendors that you choose. So that's like the two main things I would say is right now it's securing your resources. Your resources is where you're going to get your information from, the vendors that you're going to use, the contractors you're going to use, and finding people that you can trust, that especially with the smoke claims at first, that will advocate for you to get stuff thrown away, and that will give the carriers a realistic timeline of how long it's going to be before you can be back in your house. Because in Camarillo, it was 3 to 4 months. It looks like roughly 3 to 4 months of contents need to get taken out of the house and cleaned in an offsite place, and that takes a long time, and then brought back in. And so the vendors that are doing all this need to be willing to communicate with your insurance carrier for you and say, it is going to take this long. They're going to need housing for this long. And so those are like the main points I can think of. Is there any other questions you had that came up when I'm
Yeah,
talking?
there are a billion. So I'm just
Yeah.
we're gonna go a little bit over the 60 minutes right now, which is like one of the main things that's coming up is debris removal. What I know that somebody told me that if I do private debris removal, it's going to cost me about 3 times as much as accepting the offer from the state or FEMA or somebody to clear my debris. What is some guidance around what people should be saying yes to or not around debris removal?
That's also individual with each claim. There's generally what will happen with the state or the county or whoever it is that's going to do the debris removal. They'll charge you that same $80,000, but they'll charge your insurance company, and they'll max out your coverage. They'll take all of the coverage that you have for debris removal, and then usually they will assume the responsibility of the difference between what you pay out.
Say it's $100,000 in debris removal, and you only have 80,000 in coverage. They're going to do all of it still, and the state is covering the difference for them. That's usually the way the program works. This isn't, the answer is individual to each person's situation though, because how much debris removal coverage you have and what the quotes are that are coming in are going to be important. So it's not a simple answer always to be like, hey, you should take the state option or you should do it privately.
Yeah.
And
so how do we
it
find
takes
out
looking at those numbers
for that?
What's that?
How do we find out how much coverage we have for that?
I mean, you can have us do a policy review for you. We do it every time, but it's outlined in your policy. It's not always easy to find. If you have a PDF that you can search the phrase debris removal. You can see what percentage it has there. Usually is 5% of a specific coverage. So of coverage A, Sometimes it's another 5% of your personal property coverage as well on top of that, which is a lot of the debris removal that has to happen is the personal property that burned up that has to go out as well. And this is an important point, if you don't utilize that personal property debris removal in this debris removal process, it's money lost later. Meaning, so say you have $10,000 extra for personal property debris removal and it was never billed properly in the beginning, well, you're not going to have personal property to remove 6 months from now.
Yeah, stay out of the, or just try and stay out of the details. And the generalized thing is generally for most people, it's better to take the FEMA. I can't say a blanket statement that yes, it is better or not better.
Yeah.
It's good to have someone take a look at what you have in order to know for sure. Get intimate with your policy. If you're going to be advocating for yourself, it's 80 pages of reading, and look out for the keywords that say extension of coverage and exclusion. Those are the two things: extension and coverage and exclusions, and just pay attention to those.
So, in the interest of starting to wrap this up, but I want to flag that we're going to have more of these conversations going forward. We want to gather more questions from people and get more pointed and more in the weeds with this stuff for people. But if you love someone who has gone through this process and you want to help them, obviously, it sounds like the first step is figuring out whether or not you're going to need help with this claims process. So getting super familiar with your policy is a good thing. So printing it out is what we did. We went out and used our emergency money to buy a printer. We printed it out, and my girlfriend is a very detail-oriented person, so she's been going through all of the policies that we have and like highlighting stuff that's relevant and then going to bat. If you're not a person who can do that, maybe consider a public adjuster or figure out if that's something that you want. A question we can stay on probably another 15 or 30 minutes or something. Another question that's coming up is how, like, what are best practices for dealing with your adjuster and like navigating this process? And then also how to do that, how to be useful to somebody specifically, like an elderly person, because there are a lot of those in Altadena, or a person who is like not a native English speaker. Best practices and how to help do that for others.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we spend most of our time doing, is helping people advocate for themselves or advocate. A lot of people that utilize our online service, which is self-advocacy, are doing it for their parents, right? Like, hey, my parents had a claim. We need help and some guidance going through this. This is where we're actually really familiar. And one of the first bits of it, your question was, how do I interact with my insurance adjuster, right? And your insurance adjuster is a person, and is not one person. Usually it's usually several people, and it may change throughout, and almost certainly will change throughout your claim. And so the dynamics that are at play within any negotiation relationship are at play here. That adjuster could have had a good day, a bad day, could be temporarily in California for 2 months working on your claim and then gone. You just could have all that could discriminate against you for any number of reasons, or be there to help you out and want to get the best thing for you. And you don't know what their incentives or what their mindset is coming into it. And so my first bit of information or advice to people is, you just have to assume that you are the advocate for your claim. They're not whatever their slogan says when they walk in the door. They work for an insurance company, and they have a job to do within that, and they have guidelines that they work with. And so what are your personal guidelines in this claim? How do you want to be treated? Do you want to be the one driving this process? How much clarity do you want? And so whenever you're having a conversation with your adjuster, it's to remember, this is a person. Try not to get contentious, because they'll respond to that.
Yeah, be kind. I mean, honey wins a lot more than poison. 100%. You know, like, start off real kind. You can get aggressive later.
Yeah, there are times where you may need to get assertive, would be maybe the word I would say, and maybe even escalate things. There are times for that, certainly within a claims process, but you don't even as public adjusters, like you don't open up a relationship that way with someone. Think of it as, I'm going to work with this person towards this ultimate goal. Your goals are almost maybe a little bit different. They want to get your claim paid. You want to get everything out of your policy. That is the perspective that I think everyone should have, especially if you have a total loss. You've been paying for this policy. You have all these limits within it. My goal is to get everything I can out of this policy. There's never everything's gone now. Let me go get everything I can. Your adjuster's goal isn't the same thing, but it's to help you through the process. So anyways, communicate with them kindly, I would say respectfully, knowledgeably, and very much understanding that, again, what are the dynamics of talking to any person like this, and your goal is to help them along the path towards what you're trying to do. So if you want all of your coverage A and they're not there yet, you had 700,000, they've only paid you 500, and there's this goal. I want that other 200,000. I want that for rebuilding my house. I need to help this adjuster get there. So do I need to go get another estimate from a contractor? And you can even ask your adjuster. This is a really great question that we'll type up, and because we write emails for people to send to their adjuster. Hey, what other information would you need from me for me to be able to get that extra money I'm asking for? Because I feel like I'm not presenting you the right information, or maybe we're miscommunicating. So what else would you need for me to get it? And they'll tell you sometimes, you know what? Oh, like, we just don't see how it could cost that much for the stucco work that you had. I said, oh, that's really good to know. Okay, let me go get some more information and bring it back to you. Right. And you're helping them to get, and you may feel like, oh, they should be doing this, right? They're my adjuster. I've been paying them the premiums. Sometimes they just won't. Like, you have to help them along there. You want that extra $200,000. And so if you're helping someone else to do this, you're asking about if it's your parents, if it's your friend, if it's your elderly neighbor, whoever it might be, all those same things remain true, right? This is a very challenging process, and it's more true for non-native English speakers, even though they will have people that speak Spanish that are adjusters or translators. We all know the world that they're navigating, just like it is every other day in Los Angeles, is just different, right? And it'll have its own challenges. So I think being really aware of that, and it's a long, again, we can go into this individual conversation is one of the ones that we're passionate about, is how people have those interactions. So I can talk about it all day. But those are just the few of the thoughts that kind of come to mind there.
I just want
So
to grab everybody who's in this Zoom. If you're somebody who lost their home or you're dealing with any of this, now is the time. In the last, like, we'll do another 25 minutes. Put your questions in the box below, and our team will circle it up and pass it to me through something that I can see with my weird, curious post-fire eyeballs. It's a curious place in here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A question for you is about renters. What should renters do if their landlords have filed an insurance claim for total loss on the property when the property has damage but isn't a total loss? A renter was told that they were not allowed to collect or claim their property or things that are still at the property and or file for reimbursement for those things. Can we just talk about like top three guidelines for renters?
one is just that the renters, all you're insured for as a renter under your renter's insurance is your contents that are in the house. And a lot of times, most renters are underinsured for those things.
And additional living expenses.
And additional living expenses. I'm sorry. And contents and additional living expenses. And just know that if you had really expensive things like a $5,000 guitar in your house and you didn't have it scheduled on your insurance, it can be hard to get these things paid for if you didn't have proof. So gather all of the photos you can possibly find of just like your family inside of your apartment, your cat, whatever, and it has your guitar in the background. Like, all these things are really going to help you as a renter get prepared to advocate for yourself. I am not prepared to speak on really the specifics of that situation that you just had. That sounds really odd to me, that they would be told that they can't file a claim on their own belongings because they're calling the house a total loss. They might not be letting them in the house because it's red tagged or something. I don't want to
There's so many dynamics at play
assume.
that we all know between landlords and renters in Los Angeles. And unfortunately, the power dynamics there don't really shift when a claim happens. They actually get it magnified some more. So I think being really well aware of and again, this isn't our area of expertise, but getting familiar with the renters advocacy groups. I have connected people to them in the past that have claims, so that you know what your rights are, even if they aren't as big as you would hope them to be. Because what sounds like that person is getting some information that may not be accurate about what can happen, what they can do after a claim. Your property is still your property. If it's an evacuation zone that you can't get to, then you can't get to it. It sounds like they're saying, like, my landlord's saying it's worse than it is. That, and maybe behind that question, I don't want to assume too much, but maybe behind it is this hope that maybe I'll get back into that place sooner. And I want to be able to push for that. And they want to be able to get all this work done on the dime of their insurance company.
Yeah, I
And
think
you
it's
have,
into like a legal issue that
yeah,
is beyond insurance.
yeah, you have some conflicting incentives there. Um, but to be honest, uh, it'd be a hard, if I'm reading that situation right, it'd be a hard battle for you to win as a renter in this scenario, right? The people that are fire damaged or fire affected that are owners of property are going to be getting the benefit of the doubt from the city and state, is my guess.
So without getting too into that person specific, the top lines that I'm hearing are that if you are a renter, you have your own renter's insurance, then that insurance should cover all of your property and any of your loss of use coverage expenses.
Up to
Yeah.
your limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may also cover one other thing called betterments, depending on the policy, which means like if you, and this is usually for condo owners, but I've
Or
seen it
businesses.
businesses. I've seen it in renters, so it's worth noting. If you bought the appliances for your apartment, if you did some of the painting, like if you put money out into there, you may have some coverage for that in there.
Yeah, if you built the
Yeah.
addition.
The important thing is just like any other one, is understanding what is in your policy and what isn't, because some of them have no loss of use coverage. And so you don't want to assume that you have coverage for something that's not there. The best, you know, education is the best thing you can have right now. You don't want to assume something about your policy that isn't there and make any decisions around it. So, what coverage do you have? How much is it for? And then it's the same process as the other portions of the claim. You're just not going to be advocating for the building. You're going to be advocating for your personal property, just like you talked about before. I would just they need your executive assistants to help them through that. Maybe they don't have as much property, but it's still valuable to them, right? There's a different dollar amount usually for renters, but not always. Some people are renting large houses too. So same rules apply. Get familiar with your policy, advocate for yourself with your personal property, be really thorough with that. And with your additional living expenses, um, understand that they're going to have to last you a long time.
So let's talk about that. So ALE, right? The
Mm-hmm.
additional living expenses or loss of use coverage, for those who aren't
Mm-hmm.
familiar with what this stuff is acronymed as. One of the questions is, can you use your ALE coverage anywhere in the world? Can you move out of state or country for 2 years?
Yeah, I just answered this for someone actually on another Zoom call 2 days ago. The answer is yes, generally. Adjusters can be kind of weird about it sometimes because I've had people that are like, "Hey, I just need to get out of Dodge for 2 weeks. I can't be here right now. I'm going to take my family to Mexico." And the answer is, yeah, you can totally do that. They're not going to reimburse you for your whole Mexico trip, but say your fair rental value for your house was $5,000 or $10,000 a month, and your Mexico trip cost 15,000 for that month, they should be reimbursing you for that five. Or to your question earlier, if they gave you this lump sum of money and you're asking, can I use it towards this? Yes, but they may only categorize a certain amount of that trip or that out of state stay. Or if you went and stayed in Europe for this whole time that this fire happened, again, there's no limit as to where you can spend your additional living expenses. So the simple answer is you can stay where you want to, but your adjuster may be peeved by it a little bit for some dumb reason.
Yeah, I've had one where they had they're in Ventura, which is close to the beach, or Camarillo, and they had to go 5 miles away, and they're close to the beach, and the adjuster got upset because they're like, "We're not paying for them to have a vacation, man." I'm like, "Dude, it's 5 miles away. It just happens to be at a beach." And like you have to have those conversations, but at the end of the day, there's nothing they can say about it at the end. They just have to, they end up having to pay for, well, he mentioned something, fair rental value. And that is the amount that you could rent a home of equal size with furnished, equal size, equal amenities, can have a dog, whatever it is, in your area.
for the amount of time that you need it.
Yeah.
So this is exactly what I was going to go to next. For people to be able to advocate for themselves, what I understand or what I'm understanding from this conversation is the best thing they can do is go on Zillow or whatever and looked for if they had a 3 bedroom, 2 bath or a 2 bedroom, 1 bath, then you get on whatever rental website and you look for furnished 3 bedroom, 2 bath or 2 bedroom, 1 bath,
Yep.
and you collate those links and send that to your adjuster. Don't waste time arguing and getting into conceptuals. Just send them that link. Here's what it actually costs. Just send me that amount in a lump sum upfront.
Yeah.
You can ask for that, and there are services that will give you what you just did. They'll do that homework project for you. So we know rental services we'll ask them, hey, can you give me a fair rental value report on this property? And so there are probably enough that it would offer that for free. I'm not sure which all the ones are that and how much their capacity is.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it yourself, yes, it's essentially doing what you just said.
Yeah, that's all that they really do is they go on to Zillow. You find two or three, make sure it's at least two or three so you can average the prices of them and then say this is the average price of a home in this area. So just get two or three average prices, give that to them. That's ultimately what the housing companies are doing.
Yeah.
So to recap, if you're struggling with loss of use coverage that is adequate for your place, go to Zillow, type in whatever your bedroom and bathroom count was and the amenities that you had at your house. Find three of them, but furnished. Three bed, two bath, right? Yard, furnished.
Can have a
Gather,
dog.
can
Like
have a
those things
dog,
matter too.
Yeah.
right? Big time. And pet friendly. And find three listings, gather those and aggregate, average out what the monthly cost is, and say to your adjuster, I want my amount in a lump sum. Here's the amount that times 24, right? Because they're saying up to 24 months. If that's what your policy says you're covered for. If it's 12 months, then times 12. If it's 24 months, then times 24. And you say, this is well over what my coverage is. This justifies you sending me all of that money in a lump sum. And then you no longer have to navigate sending them a receipt for this or an invoice for that. And you can just deal with your housing on your own. Is that correct, guys?
You're very close. One thing I want to say that is I don't want to give people the wrong information is that they don't owe it in a lump sum up front. That's a courtesy most of the time that they give in a lump sum. They owe for it if it's incurred. So if you incurred doesn't mean that you paid for it. That means that you signed a lease for it. So if you signed a lease for 12 months, that is now incurred. But if you're just wanting to take the money and month to month try and figure out what it is, they might ask for a lease agreement or even a receipt that you gave a check to a landlord or something just to show that you have incurred this amount. And so it can be challenging to get them to give you a lump sum of even a few months up front unless you have a lease for that.
Got it. Okay, next question that we've got here is what about homes that did not burn down but are surrounded by those that did? I'm concerned that my insurance is going to push me to return to an unsafe home or area quickly, significantly before the loss of use coverage is used up.
Yeah, we saw this one on there. Do you want to
I
talk
mean,
about it?
it's still happening in Camarillo.
Yeah.
Like we have people that are in houses surrounded by other ones that burn down, and there, Chris will have things to add to this, I'm sure, but there, Camarillo has a hard date that all the debris removal has to be done by. So March 15th is theirs, which is about 4 or 5 months after the date of loss. And meaning that what the request that we were able to make that to insurance companies is, hey, there's this hard date that this county has set to get all of this hazardous material out of there. Can we at least, for these homes that are affected but not burned down, can we at least wait till after that so that they're not surrounded by asbestos abatement and hazardous material abatement going on all around them? And
Most of them say no still.
most of them are still saying no. Like even that. So my point is, it is not an easy negotiation to have, an argument to have. We are getting doctor's notes.
Yeah,
having people get doctor's
that's
notes.
like one of the best things. I would say that if you're able to get a doctor to say that you have some sort of respiratory condition or just a condition that would make it so that you shouldn't be in an unhealthy situation,
Not
that
just an opinion. They don't have to say that you have a condition. Even if a doctor offers a professional opinion and says this is unsafe to go back to
yeah,
for these reasons, and we can also provide. There are pretty good articles that talk about.
yeah, I'm gonna give you IO some articles that are by one of like the foremost fire experts in the country about what the chemicals are that are after the fire and what type of stuff is there, so that people can give that to their insurance carrier and say, how do I deal with this? And it's a fight. I mean, that is a big fight. We have people in Maui that everything burned down around them and the insurance carrier wanted them to clean up within the first week, and then they had the debris still going into their house the entire time, and they were trying to figure out, should we wrap our whole house in plastic? And then it was wild. And so, but the biggest thing that would help is a doctor's opinion, because now the insurance company is legally obligated in some way to have addressed this doctor's opinion. If it ever goes to legal action in the future, you can be like, I gave you a doctor's note and you made me go back into this. And they're a little bit more liable at that point.
Got it. Okay, so as we start to wind this down, again, I want to remind everybody that we've created a free assistant program that is a live human being that's going to help you navigate this process. iolovesyou.com/postfire assistant. All you got to do is put your name in there and they will get in touch with you. They will navigate you through this entire process. We're obviously going to get together with the Mooney brothers and aggregate their resources so that we can also help. That person can help you navigate all of this stuff correctly. Again, it's not legal or financial advice, but it is an executive assistant to help you navigate all of the advice that you're getting and deal with spreadsheets and all of this absolutely mind-numbing stuff. Okay. Another question from the chat is our insurer said that their spreadsheet is required. Their spreadsheet is required, even though we've done our own. Theirs has much more detailed info about the state of each item. So do they have to do the insurer's form or can they do their own inventory?
In this situation, per California code, they don't have to do the insurer's form. That they can do a more simple inventory list of their own. What you want to make sure that you have on that inventory list is details about the item. If it's an expensive item, you want to get as detailed as you possibly can about what it is, where you got it, how much it cost.
What we're talking about is when you fill out that sheet of all of your stuff and they give you your personal property amount, whatever's left in your policy is going to be this depreciation conversation.
No, that's not
No.
what it is. Yeah.
So say you gave them a list that totaled $200,000. They're going to pay you $140,000 of that $200,000 list and say, well, that's because your stuff was it's depreciated. And so if your limit is 200,000 and your list is 200,000, you go and you're like, man, I made it. They're going to give me $200,000 now. And then what they actually give you is 140. You're like, what the heck? Where's all the rest of this money? They're like, oh, you have to go buy new stuff and show us receipts. And that's when you get your depreciation money back. And so the goal is if you're really underinsured with your contents, that you don't stop writing that list at your insurance amount. You go way above the insurance amount. If you're insured for 140 in contents, you try and get $200,000 on that contents list because then
for 200, you're writing up $300,000 if you have that amount of stuff there.
Which is, let's just flag that to people.
Yeah.
If actually
do not write anything fraudulent. Nothing. Be as honest, completely honest as possible. The thing with the ages is like most people can't remember exactly when they bought something. It's not important to remember exactly when and be conservative. That's that. Do not say anything fraudulent. Do not lie on this goes with ALE too. Like don't lie about where you're staying. Don't lie about anything in the claim because as soon as they figure out some way that you just blatantly lied to them, they can bring the whole claim crashing down on you.
So that's actually the last question that I'm going to ask you from the chat before we do a little wrap up. The question is, if I'm staying with a friend who is not currently charging me rent and may not ever, am I still entitled to my ALE up to the max of comparable listings? My policy allows me to pay that person directly if need be. So what proof am I required to provide them? A lawyer I spoke to said we should establish a general rental agreement. So people who are in like non-traditional situations where they haven't signed a lease with like a commercial property management company or whatever, what is legally allowed? What kind of documentation and what kind of situations are people legally allowed to claim their loss of use coverages for?
The laws actually aren't any different. So if you're staying with a friend or you're staying with a family member, it's like staying with anyone else. So imagine a stranger was letting you stay there for free. You're staying with a stranger for free. But the point is, if you want that person to get reimbursed for you staying there, then you need a lease agreement with them. So whether it's a friend, a neighbor, whether it's your childhood home and you went back to stay with your parents, I tell people, look, write up a lease for that person. Even they say, hey, don't even worry about it. It's like, no, like you want them, if you have this policy that pays for you to stay somewhere, and you may need to stay with that person for a long time, right? And so that I'll put a couple of like important points about this, but the answer is yes, your additional living expenses is still, if they refuse to write up a lease agreement with you and they're like, nope, you're gonna stay here for free. Answer is yes, you can probably still get some of it, but the adjuster is going to ask, what's it for? And it's gonna be like, well, am I paying more to eat now? Am I traveling further for work now? What are these other additional living expenses?
You likely, I disagree a little bit, but
okay.
I don't think you're likely going to get you might get an upfront payment of just like 1 or 2 months, but that's when they're going to turn around and be like, prove to me that you spent that and
Yeah.
you're going to need to give proof that you gave it to your friend or something. You might
Yeah.
be able to get a little bit, but they're going to ask for proof that you're spending that money on your living expenses. And very, very, like, to make it don't just make a deal with your friend of like, hey, they're going to send you $1,000 and just give me the $1,000 back. That's a big no as
They
well
catch
too.
you doing that, they'll deny your claim.
Yeah,
And they will look into things.
so look at the
Don't
bank account.
don't say that you're staying somewhere you're not staying. Don't because they'll research these things sometimes. If you say I'm staying at this really expensive house and they're paying a lot of money for it,
They'll send a PI out there to go look and see if you walk into the house. Sometimes I've had that with my clients before where they're like, I don't believe that they're living there. They're just saying it and taking the money and have some scam going. They'll send a PI out there to see if they walked into that house and if there's another family living in the house that you say that you're living in.
yeah,
Keep everything above board.
yeah.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like things that yeah, how that what type of stuff is illegal? How do they investigate it? And yeah, just talk about a little more what you just said.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because claims are going to be there's so many of them. So I don't know how scrutinous they're going to be on all these different things. The challenge is going to be to get the funds at all. But uh, the point is, your insurance company has actually a lot of rights themselves. So their right to investigate the claim goes really far. They have the right to something called to put you into an EUO, which is I'm forgetting what that stands for at the moment. Anyways, it's a recorded statement. It's like a deposition.
Examination under oath.
Examination under oath. Thanks. Why can't I remember this? EUO. It's in your policy. Every single insurance policy that whenever your insurance company reasonably requires it, they can do an examination under oath. This is a deposition essentially, and you should have an attorney present with you if they ask you to do one. And in that EUO, they can ask for bank records. They can ask for whether or not they can or should be able to get these things is a little bit beside the point. They will ask for them, and if you don't want to give them, you may have to have an attorney involved to say like this is too private. But we've had them ask for text message records, banking records, pretty much anything you can think of, and a lot of those things they actually do have the right to if they can make a reasonable. So if their reasonable argument is we think that you're spending this money on something that you said that you weren't spending it on, that's reasonable enough for them to ask for your bank records now and then investigate this, and they can. And so the point you're asking about what you should do or should not do is that you need to be above board in anything you're communicating to them. So if you say you're doing something to your insurance company, you need to be doing that thing. If you say you had something to your insurance company, you need to have had that thing. Even if you may not have, like, it doesn't mean that you have to have a photo of it, right? It doesn't mean you have to have proof of it, right? But if they have any reasonable means to prove that what you're saying isn't true and they're able to do that, then you can get the other thing your policy says is that if you've made any material misrepresentation during this claims process and they can prove it, they can deny the whole claim outright. So, and we've seen them, this is just, I've seen them accuse people of that thing when it absolutely was not true, that there was no misrepresentation.
Try to get out of that.
And they've gotten out of it. And like, it's one that we know that's in legal proceedings right now. So these are things that happen. They're rare. We don't want everyone to be afraid of this, but you should be honest, be upright, and the easiest way to do that is to over communicate.
Okay. This has been exceptionally useful information, and I know people have a lot more questions. And everyone who's on this Zoom, we're gonna do more of these. We're gonna do one with a lawyer. We're gonna do one with all different types of people who will be helpful in this situation. So just keep an eye on my Instagram, I guess, because that's now the hub of all of this stuff. Again, we have an executive assistant program for people who have lost their homes or had difficulty with this fire. iolovesyou.com/postfire assistant. They will walk you through all of this stuff and get you set up. We're going to work with the Mooney brothers to make sure that all of that is in accordance with all of this stuff. Main highlight takeaway here is examine the hell out of your policy and make sure you're super familiar with what you have. Anything that is not covered by your policy, we're going to look to FEMA for, and familiarize yourself with your coverages and basically what it will cost to live and rebuild. And if there's any wiggle room there, then consider whether or not a public adjuster is right for you, because you can or cannot handle this process. And don't do anything illegal. Keep everything 100% above board and honest. It is your entire claim is potentially at risk if you do anything illegal. And anything else that I'm forgetting, gents?
No, I think those are mainly the highlights. I want to make sure that people, it was thrown to everyone in the chat that our free service at tugboat.claims/wildfire, just so people are aware of what that is, right? So if someone talks to us through that, it's someone from our team that used to work for insurance companies like us, that if you want any help in that, so IO, your tool sounds amazing in helping people consolidate and put information together. It probably does things that we don't even do. What we would be helpful for is the questions that where you say, like, we're not attorneys, we're not financial advisors, we are actually claim experts. And so if you have questions that you want specific to your claim answered, that's where we will continuously be helpful. And the claim process is nuance. What's the word that we were saying about it earlier? It's that it's like constantly changing. So you don't know what question you might have tomorrow. It's dynamic. That's the word. So you don't know what question might come up tomorrow. And that's the thing that our service is there for. So that there's a chat bot to our team that says, hey, my adjuster just sent me this. I don't know what to do next. What can I do right now? Or what can I say?
Yeah.
And that's what our team is there for.
Yeah, very personalized, specific
URL?
advice. What was that?
What's the URL in case people can't see the chat?
It's tugboat.claims/wildfire.
Tugboat.claims/wildfire.
/wildfire.
Yeah, and make sure you go to that link, because that's the link for the pro bono service. We have a non pro bono service that other people that are not part of the wildfire use for other claim stuff, and so that's the pro bono service, is that specific link. It's really personalized, detailed answers to questions, and even help writing emails. And that's not in our capacity as a public adjuster. We're not acting as a public adjuster in that way. We are simply teaching people how to talk and giving them the words to say.
Tugboat.claims/wildfire.
Sorry, I'm interjecting to say it's tugboat.claims/pages/wildfire.
Really?
Is it?
No, really?
Oh, it should be either one.
I think either one will work. Oh yeah, it does say that on the link that you gave me.
All right,
Oh,
we'll get it.
interesting.
We'll
Okay.
get it figured out, and I'll post it to my Instagram as well. I want to say
Thanks,
that
Clara.
there are a lot of questions on here that didn't get answered, and we're going to make best efforts to answer those questions to you over the next coming days. I want to say thank you to everybody who joined. I'm going to post a link. We're going to upload this Zoom to YouTube, and we're going to do a transcript, and we're going to make sure that it's translated into Spanish and it has closed captions on it so that you can spread it to other people and they can have all of this information. We're all flying by the seat of our pants here, but these guys have done this for a long time. So go to tugboat.claims/wildfire or try tugboat.claims/pages/
We'll make the wildfire one work.
We'll make the wildfire.
I wanted to drop one more resource that's actually an amazing resource that I forgot to put out there. And there's a nonprofit organization called United Policyholders. And you go to United Policyholders website, they'll have a lot of the information that we talked about in documents already, so that you can read this and digest it and understand it a lot better. A lot of the things we talked about in general information, they don't offer specific one-on-one advice. Like
They will if you go to the disaster center. They have people there that'll talk through some things with you that are past survivors.
Oh yeah, but usually on site out there,
at
right?
the disaster centers. They're there actually. I
Yeah.
can send you the information for some of their stuff, but
yeah, they're amazing
they're
resource.
the policyholder advocacy nonprofit. Like if there are probably several of them. United Policyholders, uphelp.org. I think it was just shared in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Great resource.
Very much recommend anything that they have to offer. It's full of public adjusters and attorneys that are offering their services and time pro bono to write the articles and everything.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for all of this. And you'll be hearing from me again soon with all of these folks who are in the chat. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.